For today's pollinator habitat tip, we're going to talk about making sure that we put the right plant into the right place. Or more importantly, making sure that we don't see what I like to describe as trying to put a square peg into a round hole. To emphasize this point today, we're going to take a look at a 95-acre native prairie that's located on the left side of your screen. This is on the Conservation Blueprint property, and this is high quality, a highly diverse prairie with over 200 different wildflower species on it. And it actually serves as one of the locations where we harvest our local ecotype wildflower seeds from. And right next door, on the right side of your screen, is a conservation program planting that's very successful. And it's pretty diverse. It was planted to 70 different wildflower species. And even though these two sites are literally side by side to each other, many of the most important native wildflower species that thrive and are in abundance in our native prairie would never be found in this conservation program planting. The conservation program seed mixture designed produced really a completely different environment and function from our native prairie. Our native prairie ecosystem is represented by a very natural balance between the grasses and the forbs, our wildflower species. And the grasses are typically represented by species that are a little shorter in stature and less robust. Likewise, the wildflower species in this prairie, like the purple prairie clover and white prairie clover that's just alive with bees today, are also represented by species that are typically shorter in stature and less robust. When I think about some of the great native wildflower species on this prairie, I think about purple loco weed, prairie turnip, aromatic aster, white beard's tongue, slender beard's tongue, sensitive briar, Missouri goldenrod, blue-eyed grass, all great native wildflower species, really good pollinator value, but they're all a little delicate. They need some elbow room, and they're not designed to handle lots of competition. Literally adjacent to our native prairie is this conservation program planting. And this was designed with a completely different set of objectives than our native prairie. And it's represented by grasses and wildflowers where the grasses are taller and more robust. Think about things like big blue stem, Indian grass, switchgrass. And you know, it seems like those grasses always want to just completely take over this planting. Likewise, where we are now in our 17th year in this planting, the wildflower species that have done well and found their happy home here are the ones that can handle this kind of competition. Think about your sunflowers, sawtooth, Maximilian, ashy sunflower, and then things like grayhead coneflower, compass plant, rosinweed, wild bergamot, common milkweed, foxglove beard's tongue, yarrow, black-eyed Susan. Those are the wildflower species that can make it here and are happy here because they can handle this kind of competition. And they're in here because they were designed specifically to meet those conservation program objectives. So here's the message that Oscar and I have for you today. Don't try to put a square peg into a round hole. Just because a plant thrives and does well in your area does not mean that that same plant will do well in your project. Case in point, our purple prairie clover and white prairie clover that thrives and is in abundance right here in our native prairie would never do well a mere 20 yards behind me in our conservation program planting. It's not its happy home. So before you start your next project, do two things. One, sit down and really think about what are the objectives that I want out of this project before you start. And number two, find a resource professional that clearly understands this concept of not putting a square peg into a round hole when your seed mixture is designed. Designing both your project objectives and seed mixture to put the right plants in the right place, now that's great habitat.